Hello, friends, and welcome to the Cinemondo Podcast. You know, the Cinemondo Podcast is a great source of movie information if you want to know whether or not you'd like to see a movie or avoid it. My friends, Kathy and what's his name, Mark, they're both really sometimes pretty good about that and tell me movies that I should see. And there's a movie called Longlegs that I have not seen. They've both seen it. I want you guys to tell me whether or not I should see this movie.
So we're going to do a point counterpoint.
Yes.
So what comes down to is I really liked Longlegs. Mark's not so much. So he's going to sort of try and talk Burke out of it. I'm going to try and talk Burke into it.
Okay.
We'll see who wins.
Well, you know, Longlegs. The good thing is it was a very popular film at the theater. To see a horror movie,
Yes.
or a thriller like this do well, and it's kind of a lower budget. I wouldn't call it indie, but a lower budget film to do well.
I would say
is
indie.
great. It's great. And Oz Perkins, the director who did Gretel and Hansel and the Blackcoat's Daughter, and is a very good director. And this film is very well made. I mean, I will say that it's well directed, it's well acted. It's Micah Monroe, Blair Underwood, Alicia Witt, and Nicolas Cage. And,
put Nicolas Cage last.
Well, I'm going by screen time.
That's true. That's fair.
So I went into this. I saw it also probably after you did, Kathy. Saw it just recently. So of course, when you go in hearing great things, you sort of like, okay, I'm expecting more.
Yeah.
And honestly, there was a lot of problems. Even though I loved, a lot. It was well made. The plot. A lot of plot points just left me sort of like, number one, very predictable. Number two, just sort of laid there and didn't work for me. And also I thought some of the characters just weren't realistic enough for me to believe. So go with that.
All right. Okay. Well, so horror movie with Nicolas Cage. Number one, Nicolas Cage as a serial killer. That's something that I have been wanting to see for a very long time. It just seems like a natural fit. Was really excited to see it. The way they introduce Nicolas Cage and then the way they kind of keep him under wraps, not only in the marketing, but in the film for a long time. So by the time you see him, you're like, what the hell? Like, it was just kind of, it was kind of surprising and weird to see how he looks because it was and I won't ruin that part, but It's gorgeous. Like, it has a very retro, almost like it's shot on film. Maybe it is. I don't know. But they have he does great framing. So he has this great shot where they introduce Nicolas Cage in the beginning where he goes up to this very isolated house with this little girl in front. And she's looking like, why is there someone in front of my house parked? She goes out there, it's snowy. It's really white and snowy, kind of Cronenberg, And you see all of a sudden there's a guy standing there. He's cropped. You just kind of see him from the waist, you don't see he's white on white. So you got the white on white in the snowy background, and he's talking in the weirdest way, like, oh, little girl, how are you? Like we've heard the phone call, we've done that. And he just has this weird voice. And then they're kind of cropping him like here. So you're barely seeing his face. And you do this great shot. I'll never forget when I first saw how great it was, where this is the intro to the movie. We don't even know what it is yet. It's like, you're just not even titles yet. So all of a sudden he kind of does this weird, like he's going to do something. He jumps and they just cut. And you're about to see his face and they cut. And it's just such a great, great moment of editing that was like, it totally makes you catch your breath. And then they show Longlegs. It's in this really retro looking, almost film, kind of blurry, low res looking thing. And the whole thing has that vibe. Like it's an old film from the 70s almost. It has that feeling. And yeah, to your point, Mark, about the performances, especially Micah Monroe, they feel very stylized and stilted. But it's so consistent. It feels very intentional. And I don't know if that's because they want her to be kind of icy and very squared off. And, she's a FBI agent. She's learning. She seems a little on the spectrum. She's just, and that's why she's so good. And they're trying to figure that out. So they're trying to track a serial killer. What's happening is these families are being wiped out by one of the family members. There's just a mass, what do they call that when families are wiped out? Famicide or whatever it's called. So, but every time they go there and they see that like a father has killed his whole family and then shot himself. So they know the father killed the family. But every time they go to the scene, there's this weird cryptic note with this kind of code on it. And then it's signed Longlegs. So they're like, somebody else is involved. So that's what they're trying to solve. It's like, how are they able to kill his family? And so that's basically, that's the start. So that's my pitch so far. So how are we doing so far?
Well, all of that makes sense, and all of it is true.
Let Bert. So far, let's
Bert,
just,
okay.
we'll keep going. We'll keep going. But Burke, so
Yeah,
far,
yeah.
where are you leaning?
So far, I like the idea of, I love 70s horror films, and the holy grail is always to try to recapture that feel of some of the best 70s films, horror films that, I'm not into the gore films, like the kills kind of movies. I like movies that stay with me, that haunt me. It doesn't even have to have any blood or, even any real death in it, Like one of my favorite movies, I keep mentioning Rosemary's Baby. Nobody dies in that film, right? No, well, the girl, the neighbor girl falls out the window, but it's not about that.
Right.
1-2 people die in The Exorcist, but it's not about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not about them being killed. It's about something else that's worse. And
that's what this is, Burke. It's not super gory. There are some moments, but and the kills are there. You see the aftermath. It's really about the process of the FBI going in and trying to solve the murder.
Yeah.
Much like it. So to your point about Micah being Mike Monroe's character, Lee Harker, being sort of this person that just doesn't seem quite, like you said, stilted. She doesn't seem quite normal. But Blair Underwood, who plays her boss, seems like the one normal character that talks like a normal person through this movie, to me, at least most of it. So we're following her, and she's just sort of this character that I wish wasn't as weird as she was. So that just sort of bothered me. It just felt a little bit they were trying too hard to be weird. And the movie's set in the 90s, not the 70s. It's like I think
no, it has a 70s look.
But it is set like in the mid 90s, so it's a little bit dated. And as far as there's no cell phones, this kind of stuff.
So out, and suddenly you have a lot more drama.
Right. And there's an early scene where she's with her partner, and they go up to this house, and that's really beautifully done and
great scene,
really stuff. But then I felt like the movie had a lot of these sort of like jump scares just with the loud music that just doesn't do anything for me. If you remember,
don't remember this.
That kind of stuff.
Don't remember that.
Oh, it's there. You'll remember.
No, it's not.
But overall, the main point of my reason why I just sort of left me hanging was there is an element of the supernatural that comes into that seems not at all what this film should be. It all of a sudden it's there, and at the end of the day, I'm like, was that supposed to be like some sort of devil or demon, or how is that working? And to me, there's the very predictable character development that happens that I won't give away to Burke, or regarding Lee Harker's mother, played by Alicia Witt. And that to me was, I figured that out 5 minutes, after she was on screen. You didn't?
So
no.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't.
No,
the thing is, she's okay. So you caught on sooner.
It just sort of like, well, because there's anyway, like
to some of it, that's part of it.
How many characters in this movie? Maybe 6.
Yeah.
So overall.
That
there's not a lot of characters in it. So if there's a surprise, it's not really much of a surprise. So
True.
when the big reveal happens, I was like, oh, okay, I caught that early on. And that kind of bummed me out. So
okay.
Well, I'm actually really stupid with surprises in movies. I'll hear people reacting when I'm watching a film. I'll hear people going, oh, and I'm like, what?
I know. I was the same way. I just want to go along for the ride.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I think even knowing the twist doesn't really ruin it, because you still got to figure out what the context is inside the film itself. Like, what is the deal with Nicolas Cage's character? What is how is it working? What is happening? So I think, and
I don't want to go into that because there's this other element to it that I won't talk about, because that's really the second half of the movie.
It's a great reveal, though.
It is, it is.
So, so we'll go a little bit deeper. So when we start getting more into Nick Cage's character.
Well, are you going to spoil it? Don't spoil it, because I'll tell you that from what you're telling me, it's making me more interested in seeing it. I'm leaning more towards Kathy's side of thinking maybe I will like it if there's a freaky twist in it, and that kind of thing I always like. And if it's kind of more of a crime scene, and like
it's more of a crime movie. It is, and that's why you can't take anything for granted. But also, I'll throw this into as a Nick Cage fan, and knowing how quirky he is, and how he's doing the Nick Cage thing again. There is some at Nick Cage. He brings something Nick Cage to it, but it's always unique. Like I feel like every scene Nick Cage is in, he brings that thing that you want to see, but not like anything he's done in another movie. Like he always brings that little extra fun Nick Cage-ness. So he has absolutely some of the best Nick Cage shit I've ever seen. Like just in it. So good. And so I love that. And they just sometimes I feel like the creepy parts in this movie are the tiny moments. Like there's just shots that you just kind of, you just get a chill. You know, you get kind of like, I don't know if I want to see more of this. You know, like where a car, like I'll go back to the house with the car in front. They go back to the scene and there's a car parked. This old station wagon, you know, wood paneling, you know, like a station wagon. And
wire.
Yes, you see two people just sitting in this car, just sitting in the car. And it's just creepy. I don't know how he makes it creepy, but it's one of those things like he will show you a scene that shouldn't be creepy and you're just feeling like you're seeing something outside the frame almost of like, there's a scene, it's in the trailer, so it's not really a giveaway, where she has a little isolated kind of like cabin in the woods kind of where she goes and she's trying to figure out this weird cryptic code, like she's trying to decode it, and she sees someone out in the woods far away, and everything they show of Nick Cage, you don't really see him clearly. He's far away, he's blurry, he's depth of field, and she sees like this guy in white and she's like, what the hell? So she's an FBI agent, so she's not like, oh my god, screaming. Like I like that she's a strong woman, so she grabs her gun, she runs outside, she's like, where is he? She's going through the woods looking for him. You know, she turns around and she looks back at her house. She sees him walking around in her house, which I was like, It was so creepy. And it's all like, shit, he's in my house. Like, so I thought those little tiny moments, I think, were the best. Like, Mark, I agree on some of your points about like when it starts to go kind of big, it almost is better when it keeps it small. Small and shocking versus big and shocking. There's a few, but it's so minimal. And I think that's why people go, it was such a slow burn. It was like kind of so muted. I'm like, but that's what was so great, is that it was just subtle and creepy. And
sometimes
small.
Those work really well. There's like those visceral things that everybody has a fear. Like the idea that you just talked about, or her turning around and he's in, you know, now she's outside of the house.
Yeah. Exactly.
And he is inside her sanctuary, you know, her safe place. He's invaded it, and now she's outside of it. That has a visceral thing that affects people in a real psychological way. Like I remember when I lived by myself in a place that I would pull up the car and I could look up and see the window of my empty home, you know, and I had like Venetian blinds in there, and I always used to think how creepy it would be if I pulled in at night in my car and I looked up and you could see the blinds separated, like somebody was looking out. And then right when I looked there, they went
snapshot.
You know, and you know, that small idea, you know, but you have to set that up though in a film. You have to make sure that the audience knows there's not supposed to be anybody in this house.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, again, he's a good director. It just didn't it had a really good start to it. I was like really compelled the first half hour, but then it just to me fell apart. If can't get into spoilers, so you have to see it. And that the last half of it just sort of laid there for me, and it wasn't revealing or interesting. It was just like, okay. So I expected more.
Okay.
But there are a lot of good things in it, and I can see why Kathy wins this argument. She's pulling out all the stops, and I'm just saying, well, you know, it didn't hit me. Great, you know. So,
no, it's fair. It's fair.
Yeah.
I mean,
Kathy knows what I like, and she's sort of aiming it to me, like she's saying, "Oh, it has a 70s vibe to it." It's like,
well, no, it's also how I feel about it. I'm telling you things I liked about it. It's not just targeting you, but it's like that's what I love about Oz Perkins in general, is that he's a very understated director, but then he'll give you this big moment at the end, and it either works for people or doesn't. Like Black Coat's Daughter, I was blown away by that insane ending because the movie is so measured, and then you have this insane thing at the end. And this one has Nick Cage, who let that. There's also, it has its humor also, and they kind of make fun of her a little bit, how kind of weird she is. They kind of have little people talking about her like, can't you just be a normal person? Right, and so they have a great moment where you're finally starting to get to see Nick Cage, and he goes into this little store. It's also in the trailer. So he goes into the store to shop for things he's going to need. So he goes in and you see him walking around. He's always wearing this great white on white outfit. And so he goes up to the counter, and there's this girl sitting there, very Gen Z, like nothing affects her. And he goes up and he does this. He's like, and she's like, and she looks over, she's like, Dad, it's that weird guy again. And just goes back to it. So we're all afraid of him, but she's all like, You're
Yeah.
just a weirdo, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit of humor of like, how afraid should we be of this guy? Because he hasn't technically, for all we know, he hasn't really killed anyone because families are killing themselves. So what is up? You know.
Right.
So
right.
you got to kind of wonder about that. It's a mystery.
That's my thing with Nicolas Cage. I really like him. I like a lot of the things that he's done. Some very favorite things of mine, but I think sometimes he can be a bit much. Like he kind of draws attention. I mean, and in some ways it works. In some things it works to draw attention to the fact that you're watching an actor. You're watching Nicolas Cage, the actor, do his Nicolas Cage thing. And sometimes that though it kind of maybe works against the story to have somebody with that type of intense gravitas or whatever it is, recognizability, which is, you know, one of the complaints that Stephen King has always had about Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining is basically like, well, it's Jack Nicholson. He's insane already. You know, you don't get to watch him become
turn into a different character. Right. Yeah.
And with Nicolas Cage, you're always kind of like, all right, he's Nicolas Cage, so he's going to have one of those freak out scenes. He's already Nicolas Cage, you know?
That's true. Well, let's take a look at posters. You can get a vibe for what it looks like.
Okay.
So this is that creepy house with the little girl in front. So it has that very isolated, gorgeous shot. I love the super bright. And this is what the actual in the movie the actual credits look like this bright red, weird kind of old style type.
And funky kerning on the letter in there. That's
really weird.
Kind of hand set, like hand lettered. And there's something uneasy about it. It's not just the word nicely typeset. This is there's like a disorienting unease to the way the letters are spaced.
Exactly. Right. So that's really nice. So what they've done in this campaign is they just take scenes from the actual film. So I'm assuming that these are all from screenshots or frame grabs or whatever from the movie. So you get a sense of that muted palette.
Right.
So this is like that beautiful shot, like this filmmaker, my God. So I love the light hitting beside her. There's a little bit of rim light on the left, but you don't really see her clearly. Like they don't really light her well. You see like she almost looks like she's kind of in ecstasy when she's like cutting herself open, which is a very creepy idea. And you just see this isolate, that same thing, that David Cronenberg white sky outside and those creepy kind of filmy curtains. Just beautiful. And then
it's got kind of a Edward Hopper vibe to it.
Yeah.
Colors and the
way the light is.
The light, yeah.
So then we have Nick Cage facing down what's her name? Martika?
Micah Monroe, but the
Micah.
character's name is Kim Harker, I think.
So we get to see Nick Cage's character with Kim Harker, the detective. So we're just seeing him from the back. So you're just still getting just a very slight vibe. And you see the code at the top.
Right.
Like, what is that? What is it? What is it? And then we get another shot from the show and from the movie. And you have this great bright red type, you know, just, I love how it's across her. It's kind of obscuring her. And that's very creepy looking. And then we have, I should have shown it before. Now we're on her side, Kim Harker looking at him, and we're still obscuring Nick Cage. And this is how Nick Cage feels throughout the film. Like you're almost seeing him, but not really. Like it's got this sort of weird, like you almost can't see the guy. We have the code at the top again, which I think is great. And then one more.
It's a different code this time though.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely an alphabet. So we have like her reacting to something, which is one of the great scenes in the movie, actually. Gorgeous. I love just her white shirt, everything and it has that sort of subdued palette, which I love. That everything's a little dark and muted, and just he's just such a great filmmaker. So story wise, a few quirks maybe, but overall, I thought so well presented.
Well, I'll say this: like the first half, when you talk about some of these shots, like there's a shot where she's on the phone, and then there's a doorway into her kitchen in the background, and you're just waiting for something to happen. Yeah. And there's that sort of intensity of like, is something going on? And those shots are really compelling early in the film, but as the movie goes on, those shots continue to happen, but they lose their power because you sort of know what's going on. So he's still shooting that way, but it's not nearly as interesting because you kind of know something. And I felt like, so for me, I would say, the first half, a great setup, but as soon as we sort of get into the meat of the story, it lost its thing for me. So obviously I'm in the minority because it's been getting great reviews, but it was just the way I felt.
I'll tell you what, go ahead, Kathy.
I was going to say, I'm very interested in Burke and you've seen it because I know that Mark and I actually diverge on what we think the last half means. So I'm very interested because I think we have different ideas about what the resolution of it. And I think they purposely are being vague, but we have two different ideas of how we think it played out. So I think it'd be kind of interesting to hear what your take is once you see it.
Okay. Well, I actually feel like Kathy wins this round. I think
it's the passion. It's the passion.
I know, and of course I wanted to love it, and I didn't. So that's always disappointing.
And I saw it. I saw a screening before it came out because I worked on the poster, so I had no idea, except that I love Oz Perkins and Nick Cage, so I had some expectations, but I didn't have the great reviews, everybody raving. Even people who don't like horror movies are like, oh my God, this movie. So I saw it going, wow. I was by myself. It was a super creepy environment to be in a little screen room by myself. So I got to just really absorb it, and see it go.
I also have to say that the posters helped me want to see it too. I just like the look of the posters and the design. I feel like if it's got that kind of a compelling design aesthetic in the posters, the film probably has an aesthetic that I'm going to like. And
it's just such a weird movie. It's just so weird.
I like weird movies. I like it when people experiment and they kind of push it a little bit. And, sometimes they're not successful. Like I remember there was a film, what was it called that Mark liked? It's not called The Babadook. It's another name like that, but it was a very experimental film.
Evil in the Woods.
Two little kids in the house, and it's just a
Skinamarink.
Skinamarink. Yes.
And I started watching it, and I was like, this is kind of, I don't know if I like this level of experimentation.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to watch a whole movie that doesn't give me more than this is giving me. So Mark said, no, you got to kind of stick with it. And so I went back to the movie and I started from the beginning and I watched the whole thing. And I understand now why Mark liked it. And I felt like it's not like a normal film. It's not a normal film experience. It's a
vibe.
Definitely a mood.
Yes.
Right.
Definitely had a weird
effect.
Hypnotic, disorienting.
It did. Hypnotic. That's a good way to say it. It was a very hypnotic movie. You had to
appreciate that.
You had to lean into it to just appreciate it. Like you said, that's a great word for it, actually. Yeah, I agree. I really like Skinamarink.
Yeah, I liked it. That when at first I was like, not for me. I don't like it. And Mark, you're crazy.
Yeah,
but then
you have to be in the mood for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Mark was like, no, go try it again, Burke.
It's also one of the movies where I feel like you can't recommend it to everyone.
Right.
Like that's one of those, like, there's horror 101, like Conjuring.
Yeah.
Which we all know how I feel about that. And then there's Longlegs, which is challenging and unusual, not the crowd pleaser, even though it has become a crowd pleaser. It's not like The Conjuring, easy to digest, everybody understands it, blah, blah, blah. You kind of go up in level. Skinamarink's way up here. That's like more advanced horror, where people who understand what they're doing, they understand the tropes, they understand why it's working, like the muffled voices you can't quite understand, the weird shots. Like you understand because you love horror, you understand what they're trying to do. But yeah, Longlegs is in between those two, I think.
Well, I later, after watching Skinamarink, one of the biggest kudos I can give it was that when I was laying in bed at night thinking about it, and it creeped me out. It kept coming back to me, the vibe of it, the feel of it, and I was looking at and just that sort of connection to childhood too. Yeah. Because I remember when I was a little kid, I had these weird. When a car would drive by and light would go across the wall, like the way they did in Hereditary, which I thought was effective. In that flashing light that you're like, what was that? When you're a kid, that I didn't really exactly know what that meant, and I always thought it was something like, what is that? And it was mysterious. And there's the mystery of shadows in the corner and the shadows in the corner where the carpet meets the wall, those weird geometries. It's hard to explain, but the idea of being able to make something like that chilling and to draw your attention to those little places, those little shadows, and those little things.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think
that's very well.
A good storyteller can tap into those things, and those are visceral. Like I always use that word visceral, but I think what that means is it attacks your genetic memories of some sort of fear that's built in, hardwired in some of us.
That's right. It's almost subconscious versus conscious. Yes. I think there's the conscious R and the subconscious, and Longlegs kind of does both of that, back and forth. I would suggest you and Mew go to the theater, just relax into it, just eat, just go in and just know it's going to kind of work this weird subdued magic, and just go in and watch on the big screen, because I watched it both ways, and so I've seen it twice, so I highly recommend, because for the subtlety I would definitely go for the big screen. Try and get to the theater for that.
I'll try, but you know what, watch it, and what we can do is we can come back and do another episode.
Yes. I'm gonna do a review where we all talk about it now freely with spoilers.
And then we'll talk about it. But then when we come back, then I'll decide whose side I'm on.
Whose I know we have. I won this round, but there's another round.
Round 2, yeah.
Well, it's fun to talk
Exactly.
about. I mean, it's a movie you can talk about, and of course, if we got it after you see it, we can talk full spoilers because that's when sort of the the second half really sort of comes in, and we can talk
We
about
can decipher the ending.
our differing
Right.
ideas of what really happened. So,
Yes.
good.
You
Well,
guys
this was fun.
know me. You both know me. I'm not like a huge horror film fan, like
Right.
gore slasher kind of stuff.
Right.
But my favorite, very many of my favorite movies are in the category of horror. And
Yeah.
I'll go nuts over a well-made horror film.
Yeah.
And there's just so few of them. So
There's so
Well,
few good
there's
ones.
a lot to like about it. It's just, I guess I went in and was ultimately disappointed by how it turned out. But I will see it and we'll talk about it.
right.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll see it again and change my mind. Who knows?
It might be worth seeing again because there's some stuff you might have missed the first time around.
Maybe so. Did you miss
Maybe.
something?
Clearly.
Clearly, I missed a lot.
Clearly you missed something.
No, I got a new appreciation for the ending. I saw it the first time I had an idea, and the second time I had a different idea. So that's where I kind of got. That's why I'm kind of
It enhances my appreciation. I remember when I watched Hereditary, I really liked it. I know we talk about that movie all the time, but I remember watching that movie and really liking it and feeling like, wow, there was something going on in there. Like there's some psychological, visceral thing that's touching something weird, like some hidden, hardwired genetic.
Yeah, it is sort of that. Like that's why I'm like, you just gotta kind of relax to watch the movie. Don't expect to go like you got. It's sort of that absorb kind of feeling, and then we'll see what you think.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. So definitely watch it, and we'll do another podcast after Burke sees it.
That's right.
And I'll explain why both of them are wrong.
Mark's gonna see it and go, Kathy, you were right. I totally got the ending wrong. You're right. This is a cool movie.
It's one, no matter what, right?
Exactly.
All right, everybody.
All right.
Check it out, Long Legs for yourself, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to our podcast.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Bye.